Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Shuffle music reviews and retrospectives from a gracelessly aging millennial. My name's Keaton. Came out with a review of the Black Crowes' new album, A Pound of Feathers, about a week ago, and I mentioned that I had been familiar with just about all their stuff, and so it wouldn't take too long to put this together, an album ranking for the Black Crowes. We're going to go through all of their studio albums and rank them worst to best. Of course, the Black Crowes formed in 1984 as a band called Mr. Crow's Garden in Atlanta, Georgia. Brothers Chris and Rich Robinson, Chris on vocals, Rich Robinson on guitar, are the creative core of the band, and in fact are its only two permanent members over their 4+ decades in existence. Like all brothers do, the Robinson brothers fight a lot, and so this band went on a couple different hiatuses over the decades, one lasting 15 years actually, from 2009 to 2024. And so the touch and go nature of the Black Crowes as a project has made the band less of a staple of the rock world and more a sort of charming retro rock, old school kind of outfit who have come and gone over the years, but it always is nice when they're around carrying the torch for rock and roll while they can manage to stay together at least. They recently released their second album since re-emerging in 2024. That's of course called A Pound of Feathers, which I reviewed on this channel, and they're currently in contention as first-time nominees to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the class of 2026. I do like this band a good deal. They've got a few great albums and more than a few great songs. I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of theirs, and for reasons we'll get into, not sure I'd call them Hall of Fame material, but in a music world where rock and roll has been all but completely taken out of the cultural conversation, they are certainly a welcome addition to the music scene after their 15-year break, shall we say. So, without further ado, let's rank their studio discography. 10 studio albums, including, of course, their newest, and that is what we will be ranking. They've released a bunch of live material as well. Each of the Robinson brothers has gone off and done solo projects during the hiatuses, a lot of which is quite good, but we are going to deal with, of course, the 10 studio albums by the Black Crowes from 1990 all the way to this year, 2026. So, number 10 is 1996's Three Snakes, One Charm. This was the band's second attempt at experimentation after their first two records, which were more or less straightforward American rock and roll albums. And then there was the more alternative-driven Amorica from 1994. And I don't want to say too much about any of those early albums lest we spoil the rest of the list, but this album, Three Snakes, One Charm, is, in my opinion, the closest the Black Crowes ever came to a real misstep. I would rank this in the 2 to 2.5 star category here. They have some clunkers. You know, it's a kind of an inconsistent discography, and this is an album I really don't care for very much at all. The first half of it is good enough. Under the Mountain is a good opener. Good Friday is a nice ballad. And I even like Blackberry. As silly as the lyrics are there, I do kind of dig the stop time rhythm and the guitar. It's a fun little groovy tune, if kind of dismissible at the end of the day. Not a classic by any means, but a fun little tune. But the second half of this album is a really tough listen. So on Only Halfway to Everywhere, Chris Robinson does this sort of rock and roll version of Tom Waits where he growls and snarls through the song. It's not terrible, but it definitely feels kind of more forced than authentic. And then you have these back-to-back acoustic tunes on here, Bring On, and How Much for Your Wings, where the guitar has this strange, almost Eastern, kind of an Indian sound to it. It's very bizarre. Nothing against Indian music, but it doesn't really work here in this context. So yeah, Three Snakes, One Charm, their least successful album by a long ways. On their previous album, which was Amorica, they had stepped outside their comfort zone in a way that worked very well. This time, maybe a step too far. So, Three Snakes, One Charm, number 10, pretty easily ranking that at the bottom of the list. Number 9 is their follow-up to Three Snakes, One Charm. This was released in 1999. It's called By Your Side. The Black Crowes had actually submitted a different album to their label called Band, but that album was rejected for being too unsafe and not commercial enough or not radio friendly enough. Don't forget, this is on the heels of Three Snakes, One Charm, which really didn't have anything that really worked as radio material. I don't think, at least. So the band regrouped after being rejected, and they fired guitarist Mark Ford, who I think is the best player they ever had in their various lineups, but okay. And they hired rock producer Kevin Shirley to make their sort of, quote, return to form album, which is, of course, By Your Side. Now, this abandoned the experimentation of their previous two efforts and instead sounded a lot like a sort of more professionally produced version of their debut album, Shake Your Moneymaker, albeit without any of the killer songs. So the album sounds fine, it's safe, it's inoffensive, but there's really no reason to listen to it when the Black Crowes have 8 albums that are better. The production is loud, it's compressed, it's very run-of-the-mill. Horsehead, Only a Fool, Heavy, Go Tell the Congregation. Good tunes, nothing wrong with them. Nothing particularly memorable here, though. This is an example of overcorrection. I think they stepped too far outside of their comfort zone on Three Snakes, and then they played it too safe on the follow-up. Definitely a better album than Three Snakes, but I would say this is, 2.5-star territory. It's just completely average. Number 8 is where we enter 3-star territory, which was my rating for A Pound of Feathers. This is the new record. In doing this list and revisiting some of their other stuff, I realized just what a throwback this is to their 1990 debut, Shake Your Moneymaker. Production-wise, it's very similar. That live in-studio kind of murky, gritty concert sound. And it works. Like I said, I gave this one 3 stars. I stand by it. So, we are in recommendation territory now. This is definitely comfort food for fans of the band and fans of the sort of old-time American rock genre that the Black Crowes have recreated in such charming fashion over the years. The songs here, not bad. I like the opener, Profane Prophecy. I like Blood Red Regret. I think that's probably the strongest song on the album. So there are not many skips here. It's fairly consistent, but again, nothing that really keeps you coming back for more necessarily. This is more interesting than an album like By Your Side because it has that very authentic kind of greasy slide guitar sound and the booming drums and even the cowbell and on some of the tracks, and it sounds like an old school rock record, which, in 2026 there's value in that, of course, given the state of rock and roll music. But again, this is where one of my critiques of the band sort of comes into focus, that they can often sound like more of a novelty act than a contemporary artist. And these are points that I made in my full review, so you can check that out if you'd like more perspective on A Pound of Feathers. Not bad, 3 stars. That's my number 8. All right, moving on to number 7. We're going to 2001's Lions. Now, Lions is probably their most panned album in the catalog. Critics hated this one, but I don't. They recorded this fresh off a tour with Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page, and the influence is definitely felt here. Generally speaking, the guitar sound and even the vocal approach are a lot sharper, a lot harsher, and more confrontational than their usual sort of wholesome meat and potatoes rock and roll sound. And so I definitely see how this could be a turnoff to some of those diehard fans. But it's not bad music. Midnight from the Inside Out sets the tone right away. The loud feedback on the electric guitar intro sounds very Zeppelin. But I think it's a good song, though. Lickin', the lead cymbal, is a polarizing track. Not a huge fan of that, but the syncopated rhythm is kind of cool. It's not bad. I actually like Ozone Mama. Cool organ part on that. Very psychedelic. Not their usual sound at all, but a good tune. And for soul singing, they kind of throw a bone to their diehard fans. It's a great kind of soul Americana tune with a really catchy chorus, that syncopated walking bass and the backing vocals. Good single. Good single. I think it's a good song. So this isn't one of their best records, but to me, it's really not the disaster that a lot of critics thought it was at the time. I'd say it's a solid 3-star effort. Definitely a departure from their usual style, but not bad at all. Not bad at all. I think this is actually one of their more underrated ones, even though it ranks toward the bottom end of the list. So, fairly good review there for Lions. Moving right along, number 6 is their comeback album from 2024 called Happiness Bastard. So this was the comeback after a 15-year breakup instigated by a feud between the Robinson brothers. And this is the band living on borrowed time, since everyone had basically assumed that they were done by this point. So under producer Jay Joyce, they make what was perhaps the most focused album since the early 90s in their career, clocking in at just 38 minutes. This is their most concise album, where they go back to basics rather than try and reinvent the wheel. It sounds great. The production is straightforward but effective. The instruments sound distinct. They sound really good. The playing is really good. Chris Robinson's voice holds up really well here. He had stayed plenty busy with his own projects during the Crow's hiatus, and it definitely shows here. His voice is not rusty at all. It's very impressive, and the playing is very impressive. The vocals are really good. Wanting and Waiting, a nice radio-friendly single, anchors the album. Bedside Manners is a nice rollicking blues opener. They also bring in country artist Lainey Wilson for the ballad Wilted Rose, which is good. This is a solid comeback here for sure. So now we're inching into like 3.5-star territory as we approach the halfway point here in the countdown. Happiness Bastards, a very, very solid comeback album. Number 5 is 2008's Warpaint. Now, this album came after the band's kind of first long break following the release of 2001's Lions. So after 7 years, this is a comeback of sorts, an album that, despite its title, is probably their mellowest album in the catalog. This was their first release on their own indie label called Silver Arrow Records. They bring in Luther Dickinson here, who's a guitarist from the North Mississippi All-Stars, as well as a new keyboard player named Adam McGoogle. And what you get here is a pretty solid rock album that puts the basics of good songwriting above any pretense about which direction the band is going in. It had been a while since their last record, so they're kind of putting things back together and just writing good songs and playing them well. And that's really what Warpaint is. Goodbye Daughters of the Revolution is a great single, perfect comeback song, straightforward, pulsing rock beat, good lyrics, catchy chorus, scratches the itch just right there. I also like Oh Josephine a lot. Locust Street is a nice acoustic number. Some bluesier tunes on here as well. Songs like Evergreen and the Reverend Charlie Jackson cover, God's Got It. I also really like the closing track here, Whoa Mule. That's a really nice mellow vibe with the harmonica and the country guitar tones. Really nice vocals and lyrics there too. So I think this was a really, really solid album. Sometimes a little distance from the previous one can be good to help a band sort of reset, because I think the Black Crowes for a while there fell into a similar kind of pattern that I think the Stone Temple Pilots fell into in the 90s, where you define yourself and then you kind of fall under pressure to redefine yourself, and you end up kind of experimenting in ways that can sometimes work and sometimes work a little less. 7 years passed between Lions and this. You just kind of get back to basics and make your comeback and focus on what matters most, which is the songwriting. And the songwriting is front and center here in a really good way. I like Warpaint a lot. I would say this is a solid 3.5-star album, the 5th best in the catalog. All right, now we're turning the corner into stuff I really like quite a bit, which is the top 4. And number 4 on here is their debut album from 1990, Shake Your Money Maker. This was the album that started it all. So just as bands were moving away from the synth sounds of the 80s and transitioning to the grunge-dominated 90s, the Black Crowes made the bold choice to check none of the above and instead just come out with a defiantly anachronistic 70s-style American Southern blues rock album. The live, muddy rock concert sound, the booming drums, the tone of the guitars, everything just screams old-time rock and roll here. The strength of this album's hits is what put the band on the map, and the hits are really the strength of the album here. She Talks to Angels is a terrific acoustic driven ballad with a great build and crescendo, driven by a great vocal performance by Chris Robinson. Then you have the definitive Otis Redding cover, Hard to Handle, which is great. But also the first two tracks here are really terrific. Twice as Hard has a great slide guitar intro and a really great soaring vocal chorus part. Jealous Again, straightforward blues rock stomper, is a minor classic in its own right. Just for the lyrics, the bridge, I like that "Stop, Understand Me." That's a great part. I did not do a good service there by any means, but check it out. They sing it better. And just the overall great groove of that track. That's just a really, really fun tune. Where this album does fall short of greatness, though, is that aside from the hits, it's kind of slim pickings here. So you got 10 tracks, you have 4 great ones. Then I'd argue you have 2 that are good enough in Sister Luck and Struttin' Blues. Those are both decent. But the other 4 tracks here are downright forgettable and, dare I say, even skippable. So it has some of the highest highs of the Black Crowes' career, but it also has its low points. It definitely has its peaks and valleys. So on the strength of its best material, it ranks 4 on the list, although this is among their most uneven records in the catalog, since there are a decent number of skips here. But you got 4 genuinely terrific tracks, and overall, a very strong album. I mean, if 4 out of 10 tracks are as good as these top 4 here, that's not bad at all. Not bad at all. Not by a long shot. All right, now we're going into the top 3. Number 3 is 2009's Before the Frost, Until the Freeze. Now, there is admittedly some subjectivity here since this was recorded in upstate New York, which is where I grew up, and this has that classic Hudson Valley sound that I kind of grew up surrounded by as someone learning to play music at open mics and hootenannies around the Hudson Valley in upstate New York. So after Warpaint, the Black Crowes wasted no time in recording their next album, and that's this one. They recorded it live in studio in front of an audience in Levon Helm's studio in upstate New York. The first 11 songs on here were released as the album Before the Frost, and then it's a double album, so the remaining 9 tracks were released as an online download called Until the Freeze. So nowadays, of course, this is packaged as essentially a double album online. But it was really released as an album with a bonus digital download attached. But I'm happy to review this as a double album because at 20 songs in 100 minutes, it is one of the most pleasant and quickest double album sits I've ever heard. It feels like a concert in a barn or a cabin because that's essentially more or less what it is. I think given that it was recorded live for an audience, the sound here is really good. The recording is crystal clear. The instruments are all captured beautifully. It definitely leans harder into roots rock and Americana, especially in the Until the Freeze portion, which are the latter 9 tracks, the second half, where we get a lot of string work from multi-instrumentalist Larry Campbell, plays banjo, fiddle, and pedal steel on the record. The first half is the more rock-heavy half, has some great songs. Appaloosa is one of my favorite Crowes songs. That's really good. Then you have the 8-minute Been a Long Time, which is great as well. I Ain't Hiding is this odd kind of disco-sounding track that feels a little out of place here, but it's still a good track nonetheless. Shady Grove is a great kind of country rock stomper. And then Garden Gate is a real kind of bluegrass country tune fit for a hillside hootenanny, and I love it. I'm a sucker for songs like that. Really simple melodic string music that feels just so lived in and so authentic and so of the earth. So I love that song. I love the recording. It's just chicken soup for the soul. Shine Along is another song in that sort of acoustic vein, less bluegrassy and more bluesy, but still has that great sort of shredded bow fiddle sound and gritty blues guitar sound. Chris Robinson really sells these songs. He sings them really well. And so I really dig this album. It really is like an intimate concert album that just happens to be a studio album since it was recorded live in studio. Solid 4-star effort here. Really impressive album. by the Black Crowes. And it's kind of unfortunate that a big hiatus followed this because this was exciting. I remember working in a music store at the time that this came out and being very impressed by it then. And I just revisited some of the tracks on it because I had been pretty familiar with this one for a long time. And yeah, I really dig it. I really dig it. I think this was a very, very impressive effort. So that is number 3. All right, getting down to brass tacks now. Number 2, the second best Black Crowes album is 1992's The Southern Harmony and Musical Companion. So this was, of course, the Black Crowes follow up their sophomore effort after Shake Your Moneymaker, produced by George Draculius and recorded in just over a week. The band brings in guitarist Mark Ford to accompany Richard Robinson and create some really, really great textured guitar interplay and rich, beautiful sounds on these songs. The album sounds much better than the debut. The playing is better. The instruments are more distinctly audible and discernible from each other. There's more instruments involved. You got keys here. You have auxiliary percussion here. You have some female backing vocals here. And so despite the fact that it was recorded in a very short period of time and recorded live in the studio, it sounds clearer and more polished than Shake Your Moneymaker. It also became the first album to have 4 number 1 hits on the rock charts, breaking Tom Petty's record from 3 years prior with Full Moon Fever. The tracks that hit number 1 here are the first 3 songs on the album, Sting Me, Remedy, and Thorn in My Pride, and then Hotel Illness, which is track 6. And so according to the general public, this album had better hits than the debut. And while I would agree that overall this is the better album than Shake Your Moneymaker on the strength of the various just general upgrades that I mentioned, the playing, the recording, the sound, the instrumentation, less filler, more consistent qualities in the songwriting. I have to say what keeps this album out of the number 1 spot, as much as I like it a lot, is I would say I don't love any of the songs on here, including the hits. Like Remedy is a really good radio song. In my opinion, it's just not a great song. Neither is Sting Me. I think Thorn in My Pride is really cool. I think it's got a great build to it. And I think Hotel Illness is a really cool track as well. I just personally never fell in love with any of these songs. Overall, the album is a great plate of comfort food if you're looking for a really well-made Southern blues and soul-inspired rock album. I think it sounds terrific. I think it's consistent. There's no real skips on here. I'm not crazy about the Time Will Tell Bob Marley cover at the end, but it's still passable. It's not a skip track. You could play this loud at a summer barbecue, cookout, cheap beer and hot dog music, and it's going to be a great time. To me, it's just missing those 1 or 2 classic tracks that would catapult it into a number 1 slot. Instead, the number 1 Black Crowes album in their discography, in my opinion, is 1994's Amorica. Now, Amorica is my number 1 because it's the album that really finds the sweet spot between novelty and the cutting edge. The Black Crowes are a band that emerged as an anachronism of sorts, an old school band playing 70s style classic rock and roll at a time when music was transitioning from one very different era, the 80s, into another very different era, the early 90s, the Seattle sound and grunge, etc. And while the Black Crowes' first 2 albums were very successful, it became evident with the release of Amorica that they were not content to simply stay in that same lane their whole career of the retro rock sort of genre recreation, sort of novelty act of being a 70s style American blues rock band. So for this one, they stepped just far enough outside of their comfort zone to avoid being typecast in that way, but you can still hear the classic rock influence in just about every track. So this album manages to be contemporary without being conformist. You have the sharp, jagged alternative rock rhythms in songs like Gone, and of course A Conspiracy, which is a great song, killer song. That's track 2. but the sound is not the same grunge aesthetic of the day. It feels alternative, but it also sounds older and dirtier than your typical alternative rock album of the mid 90s. So this feels like contemporary rock and roll influenced by classic rock and roll, but it still feels like a contemporary of its time record. High Head Blues is this kind of cool Latin groove with syncopated guitar rhythms and layered percussion, but the main verses are still very old school rock and roll. So again, you're kind of incorporating something a little different, but maintaining sort of true to yourself as what you are. I think they just navigate the imperative to update their sound for the modern era while at the same time maintaining that closeness to their roots. They walk that line perfectly on really this whole record. Nonfiction is a great country tinged acoustic number. I love the vocals. I love the lyrics on that one. Just a great mellow track with some nice electric guitar tones laid over the acoustic chords. She Gave Good Sunflower is a highlight here for sure. A really dynamic rocker with some great soloing from Mark Ford, who was still with the band at this time, of course. P25 London is another great upbeat rocker with that contemporary alt edge. Love that track. And then maybe my favorite song on the album, maybe She Gave Good Sunflower or A Conspiracy. There's a lot of great tunes on here, but I really do love the closer, which is called Descending. I love the piano part. That's the backbone of the tune, but I also love how they incorporate these twangy acoustic guitar licks that kind of mimic the piano progression. Kind of sounds like pop, rock, and country all at once. And then the fuzzy guitars under the chorus give it kind of a grunge quality on top of that. In other words, a true alternative rock tune in the best sense of the word. Lyrics are great. Terrific vocal here by Chris Robinson. Great song to close out. A great album, which in my opinion is the best in their catalog. So that is the album ranking for the Black Crowes. We're going to just go right on through once again to recap. Number 10, Three Snakes and One Charm from 1996. At number 9, we have By Your Side from 1999. Number 8 is the new one, 2026's A Pound of Feathers. Number 7 is the sort of experimental, sort of psychedelic, more controversial Lions from 2001. Number 6 is their big comeback in 2024 after a 15-year break, Happiness Bastards. Number 5 is 2008's War Paint. Number 4, the self-titled, not the self-titled, maybe I call it the self-titled because it only says the Black Crowes on the cover, but this is called Shake Your Moneymaker, of course. And then number 3, you have Before the Frost, Until the Freeze from 2009. Number 2 is 1992's The Southern Harmony and Musical Companion. And at number 1, 1994's Amorica. Let me know what you think of this list, everybody. If you're a Black Crowes fan, let me know what I got right. Let me know what I got wrong in the comments. Tell me your favorite albums by the Black Crowes, or if you are a big fan and you know all 10 of them, rank them for me and let me know where I stand with you. Thanks, everybody, very much for watching. Appreciate it very much. Please smash that like button on the way out. Smash that subscribe button if you have not already. We'll see you next time.